Hey everyone, Kunik here, back with another RPG horror story for you today. And before I begin, I just want to thank everyone for the comments and suggestions on my last video for the new tool that I'm working on for my videos. I've definitely jotted down about a dozen ideas that came from there and am going to be working quite a bit to improve the tool in the future. Anyhow, in today's story, we have a post by one of our new community members over on the brand new community subreddit, link is in the description, whereby we have another case of mixing relationships in D&D. I won't say any more, so with that all said, let's roll for initiative and begin the story. Sorry for the long story. There's a lot of details in this story to add context to why this all happened. Names changed for anonymity. I went to a community college in my home state and joined up with a tabletop role-playing club run on the various campuses there about a year ago. Having been a player and a DM for years, I was ready for some new players, rather than my close friend group. I befriended someone, let's call him Jason, who was the leader of the group and sort of the ringleader of what would become my group of friends. His DMing style involved a lot of homebrew, shook up a lot of the systems I knew, and made the game have a new breath of life for me. However, once the lockdown happened, a lot of relationships became strained. I had a girlfriend at the time who broke up with me over text and without explanation. I was heartbroken and confided things to Jason, who was essentially my best friend at the time. I told him that my ex-girlfriend was the first person I was beginning to get intimate with. Didn't go into details, and how I felt used. I tell you this now as this does have relevance later on. 6 months go by and Jason decides to run a game where it's an Isekai. Essentially, we are playing as ourselves, but D&D-ified, where our goal is to find a bunch of historical figures who are also here and bring them back to our world. The historical figures were chosen by us, each of us giving 3 people we'd like to see in a D&D form. So an awesome idea if a little goofy. A running joke in the game was myself and another player, let's call her Clara, had actually died in getting to this world while everyone else was simply teleported, meaning Clara and I were stuck here and playing that way. I played myself as setting up a place for myself to live, finding ways to make an income. Hell, I even got in good with Mages University to become a professor of magic there. During the next several sessions, we began to level up and encounter historical figures and save people. However, I noticed I'm being skimped out on a lot of rewards and stuff, which, okay, I in-game was worried about the safety of my friends. So at first I was okay with it because that's how I would react. Then I begin to notice all of the historical figures we find are on everyone else's lists and not my own. Again, strange but fine. Then we get to the big event that sets everything in motion. We had just saved a kingdom, and we're about to move on to the next one. In this first kingdom, one of our players, who was Jason's best friend and we'll call him Todd, managed to convince the king to give him half of the shares in the transportation industry. This nets him 1 million gold a day in a magical bank account that this player was planning on passing off to myself and Clara once he and the other party members leave the world. In the second kingdom, we basically save it again, and I personally have it in good with the king, as I had gained his respect in a combat trial. So I tried the same thing in getting shares with another king, with the help of Todd who pulled it off before. Jason turns to me and in character called my character a simpleton and unworthy of any sort of reward. Caught off guard, I then told the king my accomplishments, including I was the first mage in hundreds of years to score a complete 100% on the mage's aptitude test. Rolled a natural 20 when I took that test. Woo! The king then summons Merlin, yes him, and asks if I'm lying. Merlin says I'm not, but then the king says I only should get a third of the shares. Okay, that's fine. It's a bigger kingdom with more money. I asked him how much I was getting. 5,000 gold a day, from their most profitable industry, and I, in character, needed to go to meetings and prove myself at monthly checkups. The session ended, and in private, I told Jason how I was feeling like I was being treated unfairly, that a lot of the rewards were passing me by, and how I had to do more for my stuff. He said, "I'm sorry you feel that way, but the king thinks you're an idiot and doesn't trust you." I reminded Jason how I had earned his trust early on and his respect. He stops the conversation. "Okay, we'll talk about it later, yeah?" Well then, the next morning I get a message from my ex, after nearly half a year of silence, and demands to know why I've been parading around info about our sex life. Horribly confused, I ask her to explain. She said I had been telling everyone vivid details about our sex life. I didn't, and I was talking about it for the last few weeks. Absolutely befuddled, I apologized and explained what happened. This all calms down and I confront Jason, as this was the only person I told any sort of stuff about intimacy. He didn't deny it. He said I was evil and wrong for saying that my ex and I were getting a little intimate. Keep in mind, I said no details, gave him no specific acts or anything of the sort. I told him that he was lying and betraying my trust. I didn't let him slink away and called him. He said I was being ridiculous, that I was the only one who did wrong and to stop acting like a child. Then he hung up on me. After consoling with family, I began to distance myself from Jason. I called up that player who was helping me early on because he ran a D&D game with Jason and I in it. I told him Jason and I had beef and I wasn't going to be able to play. He asked why, and I simply said Jason betrayed my trust. He doesn't understand that, and so I need time away. Todd apparently confronted Jason about this and got mad at Jason when he learned what happened. Jason angrily kicks me from his game and cuts all communication. I shrugged it off and began working on a new D&D project. But then he starts taking my work. We shared a Google Drive where we both worked on Homebrew together. Everything I gave him was gone, and all of his stuff was gone too. Not wanting to cause more trouble, I let it go and began work again, but then his game came around. By this point, a few players had an idea of what was going on, and were keeping me informed on what was going on. That next session, Jason had apparently plotted out a whole session of murdering me in vivid detail. Remember, these characters were ourselves. He had decided what specific weapon he wanted to use. He had a picture, how much blood there was, vividly describing the wound, everything. The knife he used was a pocket knife he carried on him. Furthermore, he knew where I lived and was within walking distance. Everyone called him out, Clara and another player getting traumatized by the event. He apologized, saying he wasn't being himself, but everyone exploded on him and he stopped the game. He later wrote a post trying to twist the facts and made him look like the victim. Everyone left the game and we've since made a new server where we all hang out. I later learned he did this for 2 reasons. He told my ex the lies immediately after I had told him how I felt I was being treated unfairly, so he didn't like me criticizing him. He had a thing for my ex, and he always intended to ruin any chance of us getting back together. End post. What's the old saying? Bros before hoes? Really should have taken it to heart here, even if that phrase is a little derogatory nowadays. But jokes aside, again, this is not a relationship channel, so I'm not going to comment on that aspect of the story, but what I will say is that it really should have been left out of the campaign. I mean, from my perspective, Jason had absolutely no involvement in this relationship or friendship whatsoever. He simply had a thing for the OP's ex, and used that as justification to treat him badly in the game as a DM. So in my opinion, if he can't separate real life from the fictional world, at least a little bit to not treat your players unfairly, he probably doesn't belong being in a DM's role. Or just not invite the OP for his campaigns if he can't do that. But it sounded like he wanted to be vindictive, So what I will do though is congratulate all of the other players at the table for really not taking his BS and calling him out on it. He was incredibly unfair to the OP, and the other players stood up for the OP when that happened. In a lot of stories, the other players, if it doesn't involve them, just sort of stand by and let, whatever's happening to the player unfairly happen. So I'm glad that this was a bit of an opposite case. Anyhow, that's it for this story. As always, the source of the story is in the description below, along with a link to our new subreddit, so feel free to check that out. And if you like the story, and you want to see more videos just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button and bell notification icon in order to be notified of my future videos. And as about 79 to 80% of you watching are not subscribed, it would be doing me a huge favor for you to do so in order to help keep the community growing. Anyhow, while you wait for my future videos, here are a few related videos that you can watch from my channel in the meantime.